The text came through on a Tuesday afternoon while I was folding laundry, and it ended a 10-year friendship in a single gray bubble. I think it's best if you don't come to the wedding at all. 10 years. 10 years of birthdays and breakups and 3 a.m. phone calls, deleted like a typo. And the worst part? As I stood there in my living room, staring at that message with a half-folded towel in my hand, some quiet, exhausted part of me felt relieved. To understand how we got here, how I went from standing beside her at the altar to being banned from the building entirely, I have to take you back to the beginning. Back before the pregnancy, before New Orleans, before the stranger she tried to put in my hotel room. Back to the invitations. My name doesn't matter, but for the sake of this story, call me Marcus. I'm a gay man in my late 20s, working double shifts as a hospital tech while I save every spare dollar for nursing school. And for a decade, my best friend was a woman I'll call Vanessa. We met at a mutual friend's terrible college house party, bonded over how terrible it was, and left early together to get pancakes at a diner that stayed open until 4 in the morning. That was the whole friendship in miniature. Honestly, the two of us against whatever chaos was happening around us. She was sharp and funny and fiercely loyal in the way that feels like a warm coat when you're on the inside of it. What I didn't fully appreciate back then was what that loyalty looked like from the outside. Because Vanessa didn't just love her people. She managed them. I should have seen the wedding coming from a mile away, and in a sense I did. Vanessa had been planning her wedding since before she ever had a groom. I don't mean that in the cute Pinterest board way. I mean she had opinions about chair sashes in 2017 when she was single. She talked about her day, the way generals talk about invasions, logistics, positioning, contingencies. When she finally met Trevor, her now husband, I remember thinking that he seemed less like the love of her life and more like the final missing prop. That sounds cruel. Maybe it is. But I watched her plan that wedding for 18 months, and I never once saw her giddy about marrying him. I saw her giddy about controlling the single largest event she would ever be allowed to control. The invitations were the first red flag that even outsiders could see. Most wedding invitations tell you the date, the venue, and maybe the dress code. Vanessa's came with a full page of behavioral expectations. I'm not exaggerating. A printed insert in the same elegant font as the invitation itself, informing her guests how they were expected to conduct themselves at her wedding. No phones during the ceremony. No white, no cream, no ivory, no champanhe de jassin colors. No requesting songs from the DJ. Guests were expected to remain through the first dance. My mother saw it on my counter and laughed out loud. Who is she asked. The bride or the parole officer? I laughed too, but there was a knot in my stomach even then, because I knew Vanessa well enough to know that page wasn't a joke. It was a preview. Still, when she asked me to be in the bridal party, I said yes without hesitating. I want to be honest about that, because it matters for everything that came after. I wasn't tricked into this. I was thrilled. She took me to lunch, slid a little gift box across the table with a cheesy card inside that said, "I can't say I do without you." And I actually teared up in the middle of a crowded cafe. A gay man being asked to stand up in his best friend's bridal party. Do you know what that meant to me? It meant she saw me as family. It meant that after 10 years, I wasn't the funny accessory friend. I was one of her people on the inside in the photos and the story she'd tell her kids someday. I hugged her so hard I knocked over her iced tea. I said yes before the ice finished melting on the table. And I showed up. I want that on the record too. When she went dress shopping, I was there not for one appointment, but for all of them. For boutiques. 2 Saturdays completely gone. I sat on those stiff little velvet benches holding her purse and her champagne flute, telling her the truth when a dress made her look boxy and cheering when she stepped out in the one. And there was a moment in the 3rd boutique when she came out of the fitting room in this off-the-shoulder gown, and the consultant clipped her in, and Vanessa looked at herself in that big 3-way mirror, and her chin started to tremble. She caught my eye in the reflection and mouthed, "This is it." I cried. She cried. The consultant cried, though I suspect consultants cry professionally. That afternoon, I would have walked through fire for her. I need you to hold on to that image, because it's the last purely good memory I have of Vanessa. Then came the bachelorette party. New Orleans. When she first announced it in the group chat, All caps, 17 exclamation points, a fleur-de-lis emoji. I was genuinely excited. Beignet, jazz, Bourbon Street with my best friend before her wedding? Sign me up. But then the details started rolling in, and each one landed a little heavier than the last. For nights, boutique hotel in the French Quarter, group dinners at places with tasting menus, a private cocktail class, matching outfits, plural, as in multiple coordinated outfits across multiple days, purchased at our own expense. I started running numbers on my phone during a break at work, and by the time I added flights, my share of the room, the dinners, and the activities, I was staring at a figure north of $2,000. $2,000 while I was scraping together tuition for nursing school, eating rice and eggs at home, and picking up extra shifts to build my savings. $2,000 is a month and a half of my rent. It's a semester of textbooks and fees. I almost backed out right then. I typed and deleted the message a dozen times. But here's the thing about a friendship like ours. I didn't want to be the person who bailed on her once-in-a-lifetime trip over money. So I made it work in my head, and the way I made it work came down to one person, a mutual friend I'll call Dana. Dana was going to be my roommate in New Orleans. We'd split the room, split cabs, split the survival of the whole trip. Honestly, because here's the part one haven't told you yet. Aside from Vanessa and Dana, I didn't know a single other person going. Not one. You have to understand the geometry of this bridal party. Somewhere in the last 2 years, Vanessa had acquired an entirely new friend group through Trevor, his groomsmen, and their wives. Every wife was a bridesmaid. Every bridesmaid was married to a groomsman. And since the bachelor and bachelorette parties were combined into one joint trip, her idea, of course, every single person on that trip was going with their spouse. Couples, all of them already close, all of them with years of inside jokes I wasn't part of. The only exceptions were Vanessa's sister, who I sort of knew in a wave across the room way, and then me and Dana, the two relics of Vanessa's old life. The only two flying solo. The only two who hadn't been absorbed into the new group. Dana and I joked that we were the legacy hires of the bridal party. We planned to hole up in our shared room every night after the group activities, order room service beignet, and debrief like war correspondents. That shared room wasn't a detail of the trip. It was the load-bearing wall. It was the only reason I said yes. Now let me tell you about Dana, because she deserves more than a cameo in this story. Dana is one of those people whose kindness is almost a design flaw. She remembers your coffee order after hearing it once. She sends you articles about things you mentioned wanting to learn 3 months ago. She has been dating the same man, I'll call him Kyle, for nearly 10 years since before I ever met her, and Kyle is, to put it as gently as I can manage, a parasite with a nice smile. Dana pays the rent. Dana pays the bills. Dana makes the money, does the cooking, handles the cars, manages both of their lives while Kyle drifts between jobs he never keeps and hobbies he never finishes. And it's worse than laziness. He's cheated on her, more than once, in ways she found out about and somehow rationalized. He speaks to her in front of people with this low, constant contempt that makes everyone at the table go quiet. I watched him roll his eyes at her in public and felt my hands curl into fists under the table. Could I have staged some intervention? Believe me, I've written that speech in my head 100 times. But if you've ever loved someone stuck in a relationship like that, you know the brutal math of it. Push too hard and you don't free your friend. You just lose your seat beside her. Dana is a grown woman in the driver's seat of her own life, and she has chosen, over and over, to stay on that road. So I made the only choice available to a friend who wanted to remain one. I stayed close. I stayed kind. I stayed ready for the day she might need somewhere to run. Because otherwise, what is a friendship even for? What would you have done in this situation, with Dana, with any of it? Let me know in the comments, because I've turned that question over 1,000 times, and I still don't know if staying quiet made me a good friend or a coward. So that's the stage. The trip is booked, the dress is bought, and I've made an expensive piece with all of it. And then one evening Dana texts me and Vanessa together. Dinner Thursday? My treat. I have news. I couldn't go. I was on shift at the hospital, one of those overnights you can't trade away. I remember standing in the supply room, reading that text, feeling this little pang of being left out and telling myself I'd catch up with her over the weekend. It's strange, the moments you end up replaying. If I'd been at that dinner, I would have watched this whole disaster ignite in real time. Instead, I got the news the next morning over the phone in Dana's small, careful voice. So, I'm pregnant. I sat down on the edge of my bed. My first reaction, and I'm not proud of the order these came in, was fear. Pregnant. With Kyle's baby. Kyle, who couldn't keep a job. Kyle, who Dana would now be tethered to for the rest of her life, no matter what. My second reaction was to hear how she said it. Because underneath the nerves, Dana sounded happy, scared, but glowing through the phone. She'd wanted to be a mother for years. So I shoved my dread into a drawer, and I gave her my whole heart. Dana, you're going to be the most incredible mom. That baby just won the lottery. She started crying. I started crying. For about 90 seconds, it was one of the sweetest phone calls of my life. Then I asked how the dinner with Vanessa went. And there was a pause on the line that lasted just a beat too long. It was fine, Dana said. She seemed surprised. I've thought about that pause a lot since. Dana knew. Even then, she knew something had shifted. I just wasn't fluent enough in Vanessa's weather patterns to feel the pressure drop. Here's what I did know, and what I should have weighed more heavily. Vanessa had a thing about babies. Not wanting them. She was loudly, proudly child-free, which is a completely valid choice that I defended to nosy relatives on her behalf more than once. No, Vanessa's thing was resentment. Every time a friend of hers got pregnant, something curdled in her. She'd say things at brunch, little acid drops disguised as jokes. Well, that's another one who's basically dead now. R.I.P. to Jessica, survived by her group chat. When our friend Priya had her first baby and missed Vanessa's birthday dinner because the baby was sick, Vanessa sulked for a month and told anyone who'd listened that Priya had changed, as if growing a human were a personality flaw. It was a pattern, a serial one. Friends who had children got quietly demoted, one by one, from her inner circle, moved from the family shelf down to the acquaintance shelf without a word, like she was rotating stock. I used to tell myself it was insecurity, fear of being left behind. I made excuses for it because it never cost me anything. And then it cost Dana everything. It happened without a sound. That's what still gets me. No announcement, no conversation, no group discussion. I opened the bridal party group chat one morning to check a detail about the New Orleans itinerary, and something fell off, the way a room feels off when a piece of furniture is missing. I scrolled the member list. Dana was gone. Removed. Not left the group. Removed. I sat there staring at that list, counting the names twice like she might be hiding between them. Then I did what you do. I checked with Dana directly, keeping it light. Hey, did you leave the wedding chat? The three little dots appeared and disappeared. Appeared and disappeared. And then, finally, she took me out of the bridal party. I'll let her explain. I don't really want to talk about it. Followed a minute later by, I'm okay. Which is what Dana says when she is absolutely not okay. I called Vanessa that night. I paced my kitchen while the phone rang, telling myself there had to be an explanation, some misunderstanding, a glitch, anything. She picked up cheerful, mid-chew, television murmuring behind her. And when I asked, hey, what happened with Dana? Why isn't she in the party anymore? I heard her switch into a voice I recognized from watching her handle vendors. Smooth, managerial, pre-rehearsed. Oh, she said, I just didn't want her stressing about wedding stuff while she's pregnant. It's a lot, you know? The trip, the fittings, all of it. This is me looking out for her. Honestly, looking out for her. I stopped pacing. Because I've known Vanessa for 10 years, and I know the difference between her kindness voice and her spin voice. And this was spin, glossy and seamless and utterly hollow. Real concern asks questions. Real concern says, do you want to scale back? Skip the trip? We'll make it work. Real concern doesn't remove a pregnant woman from a group chat like a bouncer pulling someone out of a club. So I pushed gently. Did she ask to step back? And the gloss slipped, just for a second, but it slipped. Vanessa's voice went flat and irritated, and the truth leaked through the seams. It wasn't about protecting Dana. She was angry. Angry that Dana had picked now, of all times, to get pregnant. Angry that the bump would be, and I will never forget this phrase as long as I live, A whole thing at the wedding. A whole thing. A human being, her friend's first child, reduced to an inconvenient prop that clashed with the aesthetic. And then she said the part that broke my heart. Almost as an aside, almost proudly, she mentioned that Dana had been practically in tears on the phone when Vanessa delivered the news. She said it the way you'd report an unavoidable business outcome. Regrettable, but necessary. My best friend of 10 years described making a pregnant woman cry. A woman whose life is already a daily negotiation with a man who gives her nothing, and her tone never even flinched. I stood in my kitchen with my ear pressed to the phone and felt something in my chest quietly close a door. I didn't blow up at her. I want to be honest about that too, because for weeks afterward, I asked myself if I should have. I said something soft and useless like, I just hate that she's hurt, and Vanessa steered us on a safer ground, and we hung up on pleasant terms, and I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets for a long time. Here's the thing about watching your friend mistreat someone else. Some cowardly part of your brain whispers, but she'd never do that to you. You believe you're different. You believe your decade of loyalty bought you something hers didn't. I believed it too. I had about 2 weeks left of believing it. Because with Dana gone, there was a practical problem nobody had addressed. I no longer had a roommate for New Orleans. The entire financial and social architecture of that trip for me rested on splitting a French Quarter hotel room with my one friend on the trip, and that friend had just been erased. So I called Vanessa again, calm, ready to talk logistics, half expecting her to apologize for the ripple effect and offer to sort something out. I asked a simple question. So, with Dana out, what happens with my room? And Vanessa said, brightly, breezily, like she was announcing a fun surprise, "Oh, that's all handled. You're rooming with Brittany." I actually held the phone away from my face and looked at it. Brittany. I searched every corner of my memory. Who is Brittany? Who was Brittany? Brittany, it turned out, was a brand new bridesmaid. While I'd been consoling Dana, Vanessa had quietly patched the hole in her bridal party like she was replacing a cracked tile, recruiting some woman from the new couple's friend group, someone I had never met, never spoken to, never heard of until that exact sentence. And this total stranger had already been assigned to my hotel room. Not proposed. Assigned. The booking was already changed. This woman, who, let me remind you, had no idea who I was beyond presumably the gay one from Vanessa's old life, was going to share a room, a bathroom, 4 nights with a man she'd never once laid eyes on. Nobody had asked her how she felt about that either, as far as I could tell. And nobody had asked me. There was no conversation where I got a vote. There wasn't even a conversation where I got a heads up. Vanessa had moved me around her chessboard the same way she'd moved Dana off of it. And the only reason I found out at all was that I'd called to ask. I froze on that phone call. That's the word for it. Not anger, not yet. Just this white noise blankness while she chattered on about how great Brittany was, how I'd love her, how it worked out perfectly. Perfectly. I remember looking around my apartment while she talked, at the stack of nursing school brochures on my table, at the shift schedule on my fridge, where I'd penciled in the overtime that was going to pay for this trip. And the trip reformed itself in my mind in its new, true shape. For days in a city far from home, $2,000 deep, surrounded by married couples who all knew each other, with my one ally banished, my best friend busy being the bride, and my night spent making polite small talk with a stranger across a dark hotel room. If you're enjoying this story, by the way, hit that subscribe button. We post new stories every day, because I promise you, what this woman did next is the part one still can't believe. I told Vanessa I had to go, that I was getting called into work. A lie. I sat with it for 3 days. I want to walk you through those 3 days because from the outside, what I did next probably looks like a snap decision, and it was the opposite. I made lists. I literally made lists like the little spreadsheet gremlin I am. Reasons to go. Vanessa. 10 years. The photos. Not wanting to be the story people told later. Reasons not to go. The money I was burning that belonged to my future. The fact that I now knew, with courtroom certainty, how Vanessa treated the people in her party when they became inconvenient. The stranger in my room. The couple's club. I'd be orbiting alone. And one more thing, quieter than the rest, that I only admitted to myself on the 3rd night. I didn't want to celebrate her anymore. That was the real one. You can't tow someone for 4 days in New Orleans when the sight of their name on your phone makes your stomach drop. Dana was at home, pregnant and discarded, and I was supposed to drink hurricanes with the woman who did it and the 7 strangers who replaced her. So I called Vanessa and I bailed, but I bailed gently because I am, at my core, a person who irons conflict flat before it can wrinkle anything. I didn't say, "You've shown me who you are." I didn't mention Dana or Brittany or the room. I gave her the most face-saving exit I could construct: money. I've been going over my budget for school. I told her, and I just can't make New Orleans work. I'm so sorry. I hate this. But I'll be there for everything local: the shower, the fittings, the wedding, all of it. Every word of the money part was even true. I braced for disappointment. I'd have understood disappointment. What I got instead was silence. A long, refrigerated silence. And then a voice I'd heard her use on caterers who'd failed her. "Wow," she said. "Okay." And then, after another pause, she asked the question that ended us, delivered slow and cold. Each word placed like a card on a table. "Do you even want to be in my bridal party?" I've replayed that moment more times than I can count. Because here's what that question was underneath. It was a trapdoor with a bow on it. It wasn't a question at all. There was no answer that saved me. If I said, "Yes, of course," I'd be agreeing to swallow the trip, the stranger, the $2,000, and everything she'd done to Dana, and to keep smiling. And she knew that I knew what she'd done. The warmth was already gone from her voice. She wasn't asking whether I wanted to stay. She was informing me that I was already gone and inviting me to do the paperwork myself. 10 years of friendship, and I could hear it plain as day. There was no place being held for me anymore. The place had closed the moment I became inconvenient, just like Dana's had. So I stood in my kitchen, in the same spot where I defended her spin call weeks earlier, and I gave her the only honest answer left. Guess not. 2 words. 10 years. Guess not. She didn't fight it. That's the detail that tells you everything. She didn't gasp, didn't backpedal, didn't say, "Wait, that's not what I meant." She exhaled, almost relieved, like a manager who'd successfully maneuvered a resignation instead of a firing, and said, "Well, you can still come to the wedding as a guest." As a guest. She said it like a kindness, like a severance package. I thanked her. I actually thanked her. God help me. The politeness runs that deep in me. And we hung up, and I sat down and felt the strangest cocktail of grief and lightness, like putting down a heavy bag you'd forgotten you were carrying, because you'd been carrying it for 10 years. For a few weeks, that seemed to be the end of it. A demotion, not an execution. We didn't talk, but we hadn't formally ended anything. I told myself we'd find our way back after the wedding. Once the fever broke, once her day was behind her, and she turned back into the girl who split pancakes with me at 4 a.m. I even started thinking about what to wear as a guest, about the card I'd write. I checked in on Dana constantly. She was doing okay, all things considered, growing a whole person while Kyle grew a new excuse for not working. She and I had gotten closer through all of it, the 2 legacy hires, laid off in the same restructuring. We joked that we should have our own party the weekend of the bachelorette. Beignet delivered. No matching outfits. No behavior insert. And then came the Tuesday. The laundry. The text. "I think it's best if you don't come to the wedding at all. No call. No conversation." Not even the managerial spin voice, which at least required her to perform effort. After 10 years, I received the same treatment as a vendor she was cutting from the budget. 1 text, unilateral, final. I stood there with that towel in my hand and read it 4 times. There was a follow-up bubble a minute later, something about energy and only wanting people who are truly happy for us in the room, a little ribbon of therapy speak on top of the guillotine. I never responded. What was there to say? She had spent 18 months telling everyone exactly who she was, with the invitation insert, with Dana, with the chessboard rooms. And I had simply been the last one to accept the information. Here's the part where I'm supposed to tell you I was devastated, and for one night, I was. I sat on my couch and grieved her. Not the bride, but the girl from the diner, the one who held my hand through my worst breakup, the one I cried with in a bridal boutique mirror. That person was real, and losing her hurt like a death. But underneath the grief, something else kept bobbing to the surface, and by morning I could finally name it: relief. I had watched from the closest possible seat what being in Vanessa's life actually cost. It cost Dana her dignity in the middle of the most vulnerable season of her life. It would have cost me $2,000 for days and every boundary I had. Being exiled from that wedding wasn't a wound. It was a bullet dodged at point-blank range. The money went where it always belonged, into my nursing school fund, every untouched dollar of it. The dress shirt I'd bought went back. And the weekend of that wedding, I worked a shift, came home, and slept better than I had in months. I heard about the wedding afterward, of course. You always do. By all accounts, it went off beautifully and joylessly, exactly to specification. Guests policed, phones confiscated in spirit, if not in fact, the reception running on rails. Someone told me one of the bridesmaids got a talking to over her nail color. I believe it. Vanessa got her day, the one she'd waited her entire life for. And I hope, genuinely, that it was worth its price, because the price was every person who'd known her longer than 2 years. Dana had her baby, a healthy, screaming, perfect little girl, and I was one of the first people to hold her. Vanessa never called, never sent so much as a card. The woman who claimed she removed Dana from the bridal party to protect her from stress could not manage a single text when the baby she'd been protected for actually arrived. That silence told the whole truth, in case anyone still needed it. Drop a comment below. Do you think I made the right call walking away when I did? Or should I have torched it all the way back at that first phone call? Because Dana says I gave Vanessa too many chances, and my mother says I gave her exactly one too few, and I go back and forth on it to this day. What I don't go back and forth on is this. A wedding is supposed to be a magnifying glass held up to love. One day where everyone who matters to you gathers in one room, and you get to look around and see the whole shape of your life. But magnifying glass doesn't care what it magnifies. Point at love, and you get love bigger and brighter. Point it at control, and you get a woman who traded a pregnant friend for a stranger, a 10-year friendship for a seating chart, and every real relationship she had for one flawless, obedient afternoon. Vanessa didn't lose me over a bachelorette party, and she didn't lose Dana over a baby. She lost us the way people always lose everything, by treating the people who loved her like props in a production only she could see. I spent 10 years believing I was different, that loyalty was a shield. It isn't. With people like that, loyalty is just seniority, and seniority just means you're laid off last. The kindest thing that wedding ever did for me was showing me the door before I spent one more year holding her purse outside the fitting room, waiting for a version of her that was never coming back. Guys, the goal here is 1,000 subscribers on this channel, and we're getting closer every single day. If you have not hit subscribe yet, please consider it. It genuinely makes a difference. Thank you for being here.